hell region slightly adjusted. I think to make this a little bit easier to connect in the combo.
I've got a gift for you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of the Wraith. My name is Brian, and I know I got this in a little bit of a funky place, but this is actually how I'm starting to record things with a mic now. Keeps it nice and close, and hopefully not too loud. But I am going to throw these back on because it is an episode of the WraithCast coming up. A 0.5 episode just before the Halloween special. I'm very excited. Today, I'm going to be having Honey pop by on Discord once again to talk about a story that she has been reading for a little while now. The almighty Black Mirror. Not the TV show. As I'm sure you could have surmised. But don't forget to be awesome, my friends, and let's begin. Hello. Just a quick test to make sure.
Hello.
Excellent. I don't know why it's decided to play through my speakers instead of through my headphones, but I'll figure that out. I'll figure that out later. It's no big deal.
Okay, I definitely heard me there, but you're doing the recording, not me, so.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully this won't be trouble. I'm still getting used to the new system and whatnot, so my apologies in advance if things are a little bit silly, quality-wise, for the audience. But I made this gag already, but we're not talking about the TV show Black Mirror, are we?
No, we are not.
So, why don't you fill us in on the quick, little back of the book synopsis of what Black Mirror is.
So, Black Mirror is technically not actually... okay. I'm getting too ahead of myself. Black Mirror is a Dick Grayson Batman story about him basically trying to figure out what his social network is going to be now that he is Batman, just doing some various Batman-y stories. But the reason this story is on my mind that I wanted to discuss is because the biggest ongoing plot in this storyline is the creation and just horrible representation of James Gordon Jr. Colloquially, I call him James to make him different from his dad, who everyone calls Jim. It's the easiest way to differentiate the two, because otherwise you get into a really messy couple.
Indeed. Even though I sometimes like to call him Jimmy, but that's for a whole different reason. I just think Jimmy is just a cute name. Moving on!
But yes. So, for people who don't know, actually, for the information, Barbara Gordon already has a brother in DC Comics. This was back in pre-crisis, and he is a super international super spy who everyone thinks is dead, and he comes by now and then and helps Barbara without her ever knowing, because he has to make everyone think he's dead for international espionage reasons. He appeared for like 2-3 stories, and then crisis happened, and they never touched him again.
Is this, just to be sure, pre-crisis Barbara is Congresswoman Babs, when Babs was trying to be Congresswoman in her go-go boots and whatnot?
This was during her time as Batgirl, I believe.
Okay.
But yes, this is the same Barbara Gordon who became a Congresswoman at one time.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure it out, because DC loves their goddamn reboots, so every once in a while it's good to just get a refresher.
Yeah, this is definitely my preferred version of Batgirl Barbara Gordon. But we are not talking about pre-crisis Barbara Gordon. I would love to do that some other time, but not today. Today we are talking about Black Mirror because we get a new brother for Barbara Gordon, Jim Gordon's other biological child, who is a clinically diagnosed psychopath.
Well, Well then.
Yeah. The comic opens up. It starts off with this big, scary mystery of who is this guy when suddenly some bird cages are left open and Jim Gordon believes that his son has returned. And they're all super scary. And then, yes, he has returned. And but it's a whole bunch of red herrings all over the place. They reveal that the people who let out those birds, that started the whole thing, that was just some dumb kids. A harmless joke that James Gordon makes about killing a waitress and hiding her in the bathroom. Just the joke, and the water leaking out was just water coming out of the sink from some bad plumbing. There's just a bunch of what look like offhand jokes from somebody who is very neurodivergent, being vilified by everyone around him, and he's this dangerous person, when in reality he's just a guy with some mental issues. Only to twist, all of those red herrings were actually by James to make everyone not think that he's crazy, or not think he's evil, but he's actually super evil and super crazy because the drugs that he's supposed to take that are supposed to make him better, he actually reverse engineered them, so now they're making him worse because he wants to be a psychopath and plans on giving this medication to a bunch of babies to make them grow up and be psychopaths. And he's also just brutally torturing, slicing limb from limb, his old childhood bully.
Well, we are off to a fantastic start. It's 5.5 minutes in, and I'm already not entirely sure what the hell I just heard. When did this come out?
This comic came out 6 months before New 52 happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
So...
And I also want to stress to everyone who's watching this, do not go after Scott Snyder for this. He has done a lot of much better work. He has redeemed James Gordon with later stories that he did after Rebirth happened. The man made a mistake, and he has corrected for it. Do not go after him for this comic.
It's one of those things where it's like, oh god, I fucked up real bad with this one. And now I have to make amends and apologize and such, which is fair. It's just, wow.
If we have time, I'll discuss also the stuff that Snyder did to correct this later on.
We should have time, but very very quickly, I just want to check and make sure that we are recording, or that I'm actually recording the audio. So this is just going to be a very quick break because paranoia. So we'll be right back. And we're back. Just a little bit of quick troubleshooting so that I could make Honey a little more legible. Hopefully you can hear her a little bit better. But just for those who were not entirely sure, we were just catching up on Black Mirror and stressing that Scott Snyder has learned his lesson from his past of what the fuck was I doing writing James Gordon the way that we were writing James Gordon. Junior, that is.
Yes. But okay, so I will slow down. I'm a little speaking super fast because this was a very triggering comic for me when I first read it.
Fair dues. And I think it is worth noting that I'll just slap a big old trigger warning on here. What are what are the warnings that you would like to apply just for safety reasons?
Okay, there is no rape or any stuff like that, and I won't get into too much of the actual gore that happens in this comic, but just trigger warning for anyone who is mentally ill, who was bullied and harassed through much of their childhood for being mentally ill, because this comic did some stuff that really triggered a lot of bullying memories for me as a child.
Noted. So it's a general trigger warning for bullying and harassment and mentally ill subjects. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Just making sure that we have that out of the way so that anybody who's in the audience will know. I'll probably throw this right at the that trigger warning right at the very beginning and throw it up again here because the last thing I need to do is to have an audience get the bejesus triggered out of him. That's all I'll say.
Absolutely, yes. This comic, I do not want other people to go into this comic blind, being like I did, because this comic is actually the reason I started reviewing comics, because somebody thought this was a good idea as a first comic to read for a Batman story.
Was that somebody named Honey?
No, I didn't think so. I was recommended it.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh geez. That's
Yeah.
that's something.
But
I mean my first
Sorry,
comic
what?
/ graphic novel story was Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth. So, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that pales in comparison to yours. It's just what is it?
Yeah, I've had much better Batman stories to read since then.
Okay, fantastic. Ah.
But yeah, let's stop fooling around and pull the Band-Aid off at this moment and actually just get into James Gordon at this point.
Yeah.
But okay, so James Gordon, as established in this comic, he's the minute he is introduced, they lay down right on the bat that this character is clinically diagnosed with psychopath. He is not just a joker. He's not somebody with, we think this character has insert mental illness. He is legally, in the universe, has been given the diagnosis by a trained psychiatrist and everything.
Okay.
And that is something because this is one of the few characters who is legally, clinically diagnosed with a mental order, and this is the type of direction they chose to go with the character. Because we have, for a very long history, had problems of the mentally ill being relegated to boogeymen, serial killers, horrible people, because society just does not understand how to deal with just people who have mental illnesses.
Indeed. Which is still a trouble now. I can't imagine what it would have been like even a decade ago.
Exactly. And I do not have psychopathy myself, so I will not at all be giving my judgment on whether or not the actual portrayal of psychopathy is correct or not in this story. It's very much just it feels very much more like evil autism at the very least from the way Scott Snyder draws this, because I empathize very much with James up until the reveal that he was actually evil, which was another reason why it was so triggering.
Because it's like, I was getting along with the guy, and it turns out he's actually trying to stab people. Fantastic.
Exactly. But yes, that is so at the very beginning we get that diagnosis, and we are all introduced to what is his defining trait for most of the comic is his morbid sense of humor, where he's very well aware that people find him creepy, and acknowledging that he's not really going to be able to fix his creepiness, he turns it into a sense of humor, where he tries to make jokes, and which is a very understandable direction people with mental illnesses do, where they try to turn their quirks that turn people off into a form of comedy to alleviate people. It doesn't really work because what the jokes that he finds funny are making vague accusations that he's murdered people a bunch of times. But it at the very least comes across as a person with poor judgment on what is funny rather than an offensive portrayal of somebody at that exact moment. And then we get slow glimpses into his childhood, where we learn that he was always like this. In fact, his child therapist wanted to get him diagnosed at an early age for having psychopathy, and his parents were very much against the idea because the Joker was fresh off the boat around this time, and nobody wanted anybody to be associated with mental illness, which, honestly, considering this comic came out in 2011, and this kid would have been in the 80s, the late 80s during the Reagan administration at the time, it makes a lot of sense that this is the reaction that Jim and his wife would have had upon discovering their kid might be a psychopath.
Especially if in this comics universe, um, the John Hinckley Jr. incident is fresh in people's minds. If it is during the Reagan era.
It's like late 80s in terms of the flashbacks that we're going back to and stuff like that.
Okay, so yeah, so John Hinckley Jr. would be pretty fresh in people's memory at this point too. So
Mm-hmm. There are two standard characters. There are two fictional versions of that type of thing that we have. We have the Joker, who is a very recent example of somebody at this time, and then we also have an original psychopath character made for the story, who we'll get into in a bit later. But yeah, so for pretty much since he was a kid, he's always been this way. There's no reason for him to be this way, which is basically how it is for a lot of mental illnesses. We're just sort of born this way a lot of the time. And there's also he's looked at wrongly by most of society. His parents are super scared around him. Barbara glares at him a lot of the time and looks at him like he's always done something wrong, mostly just because he does not know how to talk to people. He's a very autistically coded character who just does not understand what is appropriate or what is not appropriate to say to people. Like in one offhand comment when Barbara's childhood friend is showing her a box with a cool lock and key that that they're going to share together. He tries to break open the box when they give it to him, and he's like, "Well, how will you be able to open it if she goes away?" And like, wait, goes away? Why would she go away? Like, if she moves? But the way he says it, they're all thinking like he's going to murder her or something. No. But it's like it's just a very clearly just offhand comment that he didn't think how to say properly. But everyone is just assuming the worst about him because he just is he's a mentally ill kid. And as you read all of this, it comes across as, at first, an incredibly well-written story about how alienating it is as a mentally ill person growing up, where everyone just assumes you're some sort of deranged psychopath because you just don't know how to talk to people. For much of the stuff when we see him as an adult, it's just about him trying to get a reference for a job because of his diagnosis as a mentally ill person, and he's just trying to get a job in a hospital, and he needs a friend's recommendation. In this situation, he needs Dick Grayson's recommendation because he's friends with Leslie Tompkins. Like, all of this is an incredibly simple, interesting story about a character who's just dealing with the fact that he's mentally ill. And if it was just that, my tone would be completely different, and I would be singing Scott Snyder's praises. And then the childhood friend of Barbara Gordon's does suddenly vanish. People think she's, and they find her dead. And the other people start disappearing in the present. And we also learn about a serial killer that Jim Gordon was tracking down around the time that the girl vanished. But they all thought the girl vanished because of Jim Gordon, because of some creepy, weird stuff. And Jim Gordon thought he had caught the criminal ahead of time, but he didn't. And he eventually learns that he in the present that the guy escaped, and he never got caught, and he actually was the one who killed the little girl, which was another really good twist, implying that, yeah, you were wrong to judge this kid because here was the actual criminal that you just let get away because you assumed the crazy kid was the one who did the job. Indeed. And then it's later revealed that, no, actually, he was around when she died because he apparently has the key to the box, even though we have confirmation that the other serial killer was the one who killed the girl. Apparently, he was still involved because he has the key that he wasn't supposed to have.
What?
Hold
on. Whoa.
He has an incredibly bad joke in one of his supervillain monologues later, where he reveals that when he was a little kid, his dad sent him to Arkham as punishment to try to scare the crazy out of him, which again would make a lot of sense as something done in the late 80s as trying to understand how to deal with mental illness. Except this comes way at the end when he's already revealed to be an actual serial killer, where he reveals that he was put right next to the Joker and he told the Joker about Barbara as suggested the Killing Joke to him, revealing afterwards that no, he was just joking, he didn't do that. But yeah.
What? Okay. Already off to a fantastic start, and it's only been 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that happened, and then we get to the moment where it's actually the face heel turn, where he reveals that no, actually he's evil. When after mentioning to Dick, oh yeah, people sort of grow. We all we take a while to come into what we're truly meant to be. I actually ran into my old childhood bully, and he's actually a nice guy now. And then at the end of the issue, we reveal no, actually, he had kidnapped his childhood bully, locked him in his basement, and has been mutilating him with a hacksaw for, like, I don't know how long. His body is completely dismembered, like his face is ripped apart, and his limbs are all hacked off.
So by his bully being a nice guy, that was code for him being dead.
Well, he's still alive. He's, like, groaning and asking to be killed, but, like, he's apparently still alive.
Well, then.
Yeah. No, this guy absolutely should have just died from shock at this point.
But it's comic books.
Yeah. But, yeah, so for all of that, it's also told primarily in the background of the story, where, like, with small little asides to Jim Gordon meeting his son again, Dick Grayson meeting James Jr. After so long, while Dick Grayson is solving other related mysteries involving, like, the daughter of Tony Zuko, or a secret auction house that sells the memorabilia of superheroes and villains, including the crowbar that killed Jason Todd.
What? This is beginning to just sound like this is beginning to just sound like for lack of a better term, mental illness is bad, the story. Which is like, oh God, Scott, how the hell did you think this was a good idea? Like, I know we're not supposed to crucify the guy, but it's just like, how did you think that this was a good idea?
Yeah, it really does. It does none of, like, the thing that really makes it so much is that the way he portrays James at the beginning of the story, for, like, the first, like, 2/3 of the comic, is, like, again, one of the most sympathetic, realistic portrayals of how the mentally ill get discriminated against as kids and as adults. And then just complete face heel turn with the reveal that no, actually, all of us bullying and oppressing kids, the mentally ill kids, because we think they're going to be psychopaths, yeah, we need to do that more because these guys are psychopathic killers, and we need to make sure that they don't do anything.
Was Scott Snyder the only person who wrote this? Because it's weirdly tonally different between the two, it sounds like.
Yeah, let me double check off a second.
Because it's like, because to me it sounds like there were two authors involved, and they were writing two completely different stories that just happened to be together for one reason or another.
So Scott Snyder is listed as the only writer for the earlier stuff and also for the later stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. See, if there was a second writer in there, then we could have, like, then there could have been the explanation of, Scott Snyder was writing the stuff that, was actually working out, and then the other writer was writing the stuff that's like, say what? But no, that's not the case at all. That is bizarre.
Mm-hmm. The editor involved with the story was Eddie Berganza. I don't know anything about their works, and again, do not harass this guy. We do not know anything that was going on behind the scenes with this story.
We haven't the slightest clue what was happening behind the scenes, so do not harass, please. I only brought it up as a hypothesis because of how wildly different, like, the story was tonally. So I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense for it to be written by one guy if it's bouncing around more than some stories that have multiple writers involved.
The only other thing I want to discuss about what James Gordon does in this story is probably the least interesting, but also the most horrific, where the Joker breaks out of prison, implied to be by James's help. This is in the present day, and somebody goes in and brutally mutilates Jim Gordon's current wife, in the style of the Joker, where her face is ripped open to be a smile, and she's locked up in the bathroom and all that. And they take her to the hospital, and twist, no, it's revealed that no, it wasn't the Joker who did it to her. It was James.
Yay, because we just have to dogpile on this poor kid. Ay.
And then we learn that he's also kidnapped Barbara Gordon and locked her stabbed her legs with knives in like the femoral artery or whatever. Where like if you remove the knife, she'll bleed to death, and so like. Slowly tries to torture her, laughing like a maniac, and she stabs him in the eye, and he just gets back up. Like he's a fucking Jason Voorhees.
Because that's another thing I want to like mention real quick, is that I don't know where this trope of the mentally ill being superhumanly strong comes from. Like, it's also a thing with people with Down syndrome where it's like, oh, apparently he's got the strength of 10 men because he's mentally deficient. I don't know where that came from, but it's like, really?
Yeah, I think it usually comes from the fact that like people with mental illnesses tend to really like repetitive, simple tasks, which weightlifting is very much a very repetitive, simple task. So there might just be a large number of them who do lift weights a lot and so are very strong as a result.
Or it's also part of a joke because it's like, you get hugged by a Down syndrome person, it's real tight because they really like it. It's like, okay, you're gonna break a rib there, but it's like, why?
Yeah. And it's also usually some primitivism stuff where like, oh, because they don't have their mind, they're more like an animal, which means they're stronger.
Yeah. Because.
But yeah, anyway, onto the comic. But yeah, like she stabs him in the eye with a knife. Like it's literally hanging out of his eye socket, and he just sort of gets up and continues. It's like it's really dumb, and yeah. So that is Black Mirror. It's a horrible mess. The other actual stories that take up the majority of it, like the daughter of Tony Zuko and the auction house, they're not worth it. They're like fine stories that if this was any other comic would just be like, okay, these are some interesting stories to have included. But they do not salvage any part of this at all. Like there is no this is one of those comics where it's just like, only read this if you genuinely want to be offended, or if you just do not care about the mentally ill, in which case I don't care what you read.
Yeah. Or in this case, reread it so that you have something to talk about on a small podcast with a Canadian person who doesn't know what they're doing with their life.
Yes, that is me. So yeah, so now that I discussed this, I do want to discuss what Scott Snyder did to... Actually, no, I want to bring up one last thing that happened literally at the end of the comic, which I brought up earlier, which was that James Gordon had self-corrected his medication that he was taking to, instead of giving him empathy and making him a good person, which he says empathy makes us weak. And so that's why he stopped taking the medication and all that. And it's like, and he actually synthesized a reverse of the effect so that it damages the amygdala so that people can't feel empathy, and plans on giving it to a bunch of newborn babies at a hospital, because that's also another trope of fear-mongering about the mentally ill, where there's this whole rotten apple spoils a bunch bad egg situation where it's like, oh, the mentally ill are going to turn other people mentally ill. It's like, no, we're not. But that's also another standard trope in horror media.
Because reasons. And I just realized a couple of things hearing about this. One, empathy is weak equals some of the people that you have seen on the internet, that, you know, the we live in a society types.
And also the fact that empathy makes us weak as the metaphor, when the comic is all about everyone else in the story having no empathy for a mentally ill child.
Yeah. Definitely something that if I rewrote it at the, like, I would definitely look at potentially like rewriting or redoing an origin thing with James Gordon Jr. if I had more confidence in my writing personally. Because I don't know about you, but when I grew up with I grew up with siblings, and while me and my brother were not great to each other, I don't remember like me being on the autism spectrum ever being a reason for it. It was just that we were brothers, and brothers usually beat the crap out of each other. But, when my sister came into the picture, everything kind of worked out. So basically what I'm saying is that I can see why Jim and Sarah?
It was the first one, so I believe it was Sarah.
Yeah, so I can see why Jim and Sarah are like, oh, I don't know, because it's them being old people. But I would imagine that Babs, at the very least, depending on the age difference, would have at least tried. It's her sibling after all, but I don't know.
This is post Infinite Crisis and all that at this point in time. So Barbara Gordon is pretty much the same age as him and Dick. They're pretty much very close in like 1 or 2 year age difference.
Yeah, so I would have imagined that Babs at the very least would have tried to be nice and tried to like understand why her sibling is different from everybody else. I don't know. Maybe it's just my personal experience wiggling its way in, but
I had a more negative relationship with my siblings regarding my mental illness, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not going to put forward my life. This is your podcast, not mine.
it's all good. But this is an interesting point because we've had different experiences because of different families, because of different environments that we used to grow up in. And whereas my parents got me diagnosed fairly early and were, they were actively trying to help me out, even if there were some creative approaches, I will say. I don't mean to pry, but how was your parental life?
At an early age as well. My mom was fairly supportive of me for much of my childhood growing up, but I had 3 siblings and a stepfather and moved quite a bit, so a lot of the other people beyond my immediate sister and my mother were not the most sympathetic towards me and my mental illness.
You moved. So you said you moved around a lot. I moved in my memory once, maybe twice at a push. So it's interesting because this kind of brings into the whole discussion of nature versus nurture, right? Where I, for one, can see Babs, at the very least, trying to be nice to her sibling, because it's her sibling, and how much that might have changed the story. Like, if Scott Snyder didn't write Babs being the judgmental sibling, but instead the sibling that got cared for, would James Gordon Jr. have acted differently in his, hyper-psychotic, as I'm going to call it for lack of a better term, state of mind, then would he have gone after maybe Jim instead of Barbara to stab them in the leg or whatnot, as an example?
It's also the case of Barbara, the age that we see Barbara at is they're both fairly young, like very clearly like 10 or younger at this point in the flashbacks of the story. Oh. This could very also easily be the point in Barbara's childhood where she had to leave her parents and move to a new family. So there could very easily be some just general resentment for being forced to move and the focusing that resentment on her whole life onto the weird other kid in her family. But also, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that Jim Gordon originally had another son back in the Silver Age. I believe his name is Tony, and I actually headcanon that I was to allow, if Tony was allowed to be brought back into the DC canon, I would have him be one of, because it's usually generally considered that that Jim Gordon had Barbara at a late point in his life. He was already an old man, like in his late 30s or something when he got Barbara. And if James Gordon is supposed to be around Barbara's age, Tony, who's very obviously written to be Barbara's older brother at all times, could have been like in his 16 or so when Barbara and Jim were like only 8 or 10 years old, and could have been and Tony and Jim could have had one of the more aggressively antagonistic relationships, as like some of those cases where like the firstborn kid doesn't usually get along with the parents very well, and maybe they had a fight, and what led to and when Tony, but also Tony might have been the only sympathetic person in James's life, being like the one good guy who like understood James's quirks and got to know him very well. But then James might have had a fight with Jim and Tony might have had a big fight, which led to Tony leaving running away from home and like joining the military, which is how he becomes a super spy later on in life. But as a result, they just Jim was did all the stuff that he did to James, locking him in Arkham as punishment and all that type of stuff, and Tony just wasn't there to look after James at the time. And when he comes back and sees everything that happened, it was already too late. He would the shitty parenting that Jim had done for his mentally ill kid had just ruined him.
Yeah. By the way, I have posted from the DC Wikia the top little bit about Tony Gordon. So
yeah, I'm aware of the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, this is for those in the audience who did not know that Tony Gordon actually existed, like I didn't until a few minutes ago.
Yeah, he's a pre-crisis character. Not a lot of pre-crisis characters, especially characters who've only had like 3 appearances in the comics. They don't usually get around into the public conscious.
Yeah, no, but it's funny because the picture that they got of him, I'm assuming he's supposed to have black hair because they're doing the thing where it's from black to blue. But
yeah, blue is usually what they go for black-haired people in the in comics.
But it's just funny to see that old technique come back.
I honestly miss it. I kind of wish they would bring it back.
Yeah, that would be slick. But yeah, so I do dig this headcanon where it's like Tony is the main sympathetic person to James if they were ever in the same continuity, and Babs could have probably picked up on that, perhaps, a little bit, but because James also left, she kind of... I have experiences being the middle kid, where it's like, you want to agree with the brother, but you also want to agree with the parents, so you kind of get caught in this very weird quandary, and leaves Babs this great big unknown.
Especially since Barbara is the adopted kid, and adopted kids tend to get very scared about being the dissenting one because they don't want to get left behind.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Babs wants so badly to help James, but because of the adoption angle, it's like she can't. So it's like, what do I do? That would have been an interesting thing where like maybe if James did kind of break, I hesitate to use that word, but you know what I mean, goes on his whole tirade and whatnot, he pulls Babs aside and is like, I know why you were scared of dear old dad, but you know that does mean that doesn't make you safe or whatever, something like that. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not the hugest fan of this story as is. So
yeah, there's no real way to clean up what happened very well, but I will then move on actually to the Batman Who Laughs mini, where Scott Snyder attempted to basically make up for what he did with the James Gordon Jr. in the comics.
Oh, well, he's at least trying to fix his mistakes at this point, right? So
yes. So what they do actually, which I thought was very good, was they reveal at the very beginning, actually, because what the basic premise of Batman Who Laughs Mini is the Batman Who Laughs has fully decided to attack Gotham and Batman, and he's opening up portals to bring other Batman from the negative universes to fight, and it's just a mess like that. And Batman needs James Jr.'s help because he needs somebody who can think like a psychopath to figure out what Batman Who Laughs is planning.
Gotcha.
And so Batman, James Jr. is currently on very intense parole at this point in time because of this, and he's taking medication that is supposed to design to help him. But if it was just a medication, I would still be pretty mad because it's kind of a sore spot that basically people act like the only way to fix a mentally ill person is to just medicate them until they're a functioning member of society. Like, the mentally ill are allowed to just be mentally ill without it being a real problem. If it was just that it was the medication that was making him a good person and the mental illness itself still made him evil, that would be different. But for the entire rest of the comic, James is off the medication. And he doesn't go evil once. He helps them fight the Joker the entire time, and he even saves Jim Gordon at one point in the comic. Like, that is, in my opinion, the big redeeming factor that Scott Snyder did, where he showed that even not taking the medication, James was fully capable of being a good person, and it wasn't the mental illness that was doing it. Another interesting point in the comic is actually that there is another evil Batman in there who is affectionately called Gunbats. He's one of my favorite characters in that little mini. But
this is Punisher, but Batman, right? I heard about this guy.
He is adorable. He is a big fucking nerd about guns. He's very cute. He makes a big thing about how much of a shitty parent Jim was to him, and he tries to do the come to the dark side thing to James, being like, don't stick around with your shitty ass dad who was horrible to you your entire child. Like, you're like us, come join our side. And he's like, no, I think I'm gonna be a hero, even though my dad was an asshole.
Because, people can change, people can be redeemed, and there's nothing wrong with, I don't know if it's right to say there's nothing wrong with me per se, but my mental illness does not dictate me being evil, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And the fact that they both acknowledge that Jim was a horrible dad and have James not decide to swap to the evil side, and even though his dad was a shitty person, it was a very good moment for me reading that comic. It definitely put Scott Snyder in a more positive light after reading that, because I actually read Black Mirror, and then I read the Batman Who Laughs mini very close in time period. Like, it was only like a few months between the two events. So it was a very whiplashy thing to see one and then see like 10 years later he had like course corrected. It was a very interesting moment.
Yeah. 10 years later, Scott Snyder's being like, holy fuck, I messed up big time. I gotta fix this.
And it's not like he was like just he was like a cringy writer for the most. Like, Scott Snyder was one of the most like politically correct, well thought writers, even during the pre-New 52 era, during the OOs. Like, he was the one who wrote a comic about Black Lives Matter before that was like a huge protest thing going on. Like, back in like the 2010, 2011, he did a big comic all about Black Lives Matter.
Speaking on that, so in essence, Black Mirror is the black spot on Scott Snyder's otherwise pretty squeaky clean record, which, just to confirm, because I don't exactly remember this, Scott Snyder might be familiar to certain Bat fans as the creator of the Court of Owls, correct?
Yes, the Court of Owls was his big baby that he was planning on doing for the Dick Grayson Batman stuff, but then New 52 happened, so he had to rewrite the story to be about Bruce Wayne instead of Dick Grayson.
But otherwise, it's very much this was what put Scott Snyder in the limelight, was Court of Owls.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, because if you're like me, who first heard about Black Mirror and then realized that it was written by Scott Snyder and had that little tickling in the back of your head, like, wait a minute, where's he from? That's where you guys would probably be familiar with. He wrote and created the Court of Owls.
I think he's also the guy behind the entire DC Metal event as well.
Let me double check. I'm going to very quickly double check, because that's a lot more recent too, and if DC Metal ever got any fans, even though they...
I know people who like DC Metal. They consider it like it's a big campy mess story. They're like, one of their like, so bad it's good type of stuff.
Yeah. I personally, Dark Knight's Metal, right?
Yeah, Dark Knight Metal is one of the stories. It's pretty much just referred to as the DC Metal event.
Okay. I was going to say, because my first result was Neil Gaiman, of all people, but no, it is actually Scott Snyder. Google lied to me. But on the topic of death metal and whatnot, can we talk about how all of, like, how Red Death and the Drowned and I forget the Green Lantern Bat were way more interesting than Cenobite Joker?
I loved the Aquawoman Batman one. I wanted a whole comic about her.
Same, and yet, and like I almost wanted her to be the dominant evil Batman, but no, we had to go with Cenobite Joker.
The Ares Batman one, in my opinion, that would have been the best one for the villain. That was such a good story.
Ares Batman, yeah, that would have been. I always forget that he's there, the really big armored guy, but.
Yeah, because he keeps getting overshadowed by the Doomsday Batman, but it's like, no, the Doomsday Batman is the lesser of the two really big, bulky Batman.
Doomsday Batman is the lesser of the two beefcakes.
But no, Gunbats will always be my favorite evil Batman.
Because he's very enthusiastic about his guns.
He's such a nerd. There's this confrontation between Batman and Gunbats in like a thing where it's like Gunbats is where Batman says, "I'm the fastest shot. I'm the best marksman in my world too." And then all Gunbats can do is just, "Ooh, what type of gun do you use? Sniper rifle, assault gun." He starts going off on these different types of guns, being a massive nerd, and then Bruce Wayne just goes, "Grappling gun," and shoots the grappling gun at him and launches him across onto like a train. It's such a dorky moment, and Gunbats is just the biggest nerd.
Man, I'm not sure what his actual reaction was, but I think it would have been funny as hell if that happened, and then Gunbats is just like, "Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!" Like he is, like Vegeta from friggin' DBZA and the Broly thing.
You scratched out there. I didn't hear anything you just said.
Oh, well, when, I'll rephrase. So, it would have been funny as hell if, when he gets grappled to the train and whatnot, Gunbats is just like, "Oh my god, he is so goddamn cool." Just rip that line right out of Dragon DBZA, when they dubbed the Broly movie, and Vegeta just lost his mind. That Broly was like, "Oh my god," that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's familiar.
In any case,
but yes. So but I'm going to let everyone down on a bit of a sadish note that there isn't a happy ending for James Gordon Jr. because during the City of Bane Arkham meltdown or whatever thing that was happening, the thing that happened just before Fear State, there was like this mini event that happened, and it resulted in Joker dying. James Gordon Jr. also dies.
Damn it.
It resulted in him dying, and James Gordon Jr. also dies in this story.
Not fun.
Yeah. Thankfully, at the very least, it is used to promote Jim Gordon and not Barbara Gordon, because that was a big pet peeve of mine for when they decided to keep doing more stories with Jim Gordon Jr. back in the day. They made him a Batgirl antagonist because of that one where he stabs her in the legs and all that. When for like 90% of the Black Mirror story, he is Jim Gordon's character. He is a foil to Jim. He represents the big black spot on Jim's life that he was a horrible parent to this kid, and this was a very Jim-focused storyline involving him. The fact that when Scott Snyder was back on writing the character during the Batman Who Laughs mini, the entire focus for the two of them was on Jim and James's relationship and how bad of a parent Jim was to him. And it would have been so easy for them to turn it into a Barbara Gordon moment and make it her be the one with needing vengeance and all that. But the Joker story and the Joker issue that we have is such a good run, and I am very happy at the very least that it is Jim who is getting the I need to avenge my son situation.
Marvelous. Good times. It's like James was, in a sense, picked on during the 2010 story that Batman Black Mirror, which is like, oh dear God, you almost don't want to read it, and then when they decide to reuse James Gordon Jr. for things, it's like, hey, I know I messed up, so for the love of all that is good and holy, I don't want to mess up again. And
exactly,
he's making all the right moves. Which, again, you mentioned that Scott Snyder was like one of the more politically correct writers for the time, which just makes me wonder what the hell was he doing with James Gordon Jr. Like, again, I'm not trying to go after the guy at all. It's just, I really want to know what his mindset was at the time.
I've seen people try to excuse this as like it was a red herring twist and all that. But the entire comic is full of the red herring twist where everyone thinks that he's the villain because of the way he acts and with the way everything is framed. There's a lot of tonal framing going on where like it makes it look like he's the bad guy. So it's not a plot twist to make him actually be bad because the story is setting him up already to be bad. What would make it a plot twist would be to actually have the Joker just be the bad guy at the end, and everyone thinks that it's James doing evil.
Right. There's so many red herrings caught in this net that it's just like, well, at this point, if the twist would be that it all was a red herring, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, I really just want to know what his mindset was, like that, because you mentioned all of the other things that he has done, and I'm just like, what? Like, what am I missing here? It's like when Gail Simone, because she was one of the writers that transitioned from the original main universe, well, not the original main universe, it's the one post-crisis, that's what it was called. She was writing post-crisis Babs for a long time, and then she had to write New 52 Babs, and New 52 Babs is kind of the beginning of the whole, let's make her Batgirl again, because being Batgirl is her better than being Oracle for some stupid reason, sort of thing. And like, I almost wonder if like he got blindsided by the New 52, and thus he kind of was slipping in his writing. Because I know for a fact that I know for sure that the New 52 blindsided Gail Simone and several other writers, because it was just like, oh, it's like DC's just going, oh, we got to reboot things now. But I'm just not 100% sure if that's exactly what it is. I'm just me. When I see something I don't know, I want to speculate until I find the answer. So that's why I'm like, I'm throwing darts here.
Yeah, the end of this comic did take place just like literally the last issue of the story was the last issue of Detective Comics before the New 52 hit. So it could very well have been that Snyder had a completely different story in mind for this, and maybe he felt like, oh, this character's just not going to exist anymore. The whole universe is being rebooted. This character might as well he might have been venting all of his hate towards just the story being suddenly not mattering anymore by just making the character not matter.
Maybe again for those who are in the audience who are about to type, are these people just making this up? I am, because I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I'm trying to figure.
Yeah, the issue of this story was the Detective Comics number 881, which is literally the last issue of Detective Comics to come out before the New 52 hit and reset everything.
Yeah, so I'm like the facts are true. It's just that I'm throwing darts at dartboards trying to figure out, like, why Scott Snyder, like, he was doing pretty good. He was writing Dick Grayson's Batman. He was writing all of these things that were doing really good. Then Batman Black Mirror comes out, and it just plummets out of left field. And then when New 52 comes around and he's writing The Courts of Owls, suddenly it's like he just shoots right back up to where he was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like...
it could well have been, like, mixed messages where, like, because it's such a massive twist, like, it just comes out of nowhere, completely breaks the entire tone of this issue. Because, like I said, the first, like, 6 issues of this whole thing with James Gordon Jr. is that he's this just mentally ill kid who had a really tough life that everyone vilified growing up. It's very sympathetic towards him. Jim Gordon, the dad's entire arc for the first bit is learning, oh, I was in the wrong here. I was assuming the kid was the criminal when it was this other guy who was the actual criminal. And then, like, for the next 3 or 4 issues, it suddenly makes a hard left twist. And maybe you start to wonder that, okay, maybe Scott Snyder was told at this point in the creation that, yeah, we're rebooting the universe. He might have got some mixed messages that, oh, we're resetting the entire continuity here. None of what you're working on is going to matter anymore. We just need you to fill out these next 4 issues so that things will, so we'll have something for just to fill out the panels before we do New 52. He might have just stopped caring and just vented all of his hate into, like, because he was setting up this character that he really liked, and then just thought, like, oh, this character doesn't matter anymore. All my work doesn't matter.
So
but, like, this is all speculation at this point.
Yeah. That's the thing we want to make 100% clear. Like, while we're working with the facts, this theory that that Honey and I have that Scott Snyder, it was just kind of got mixed messages and was just venting his hate of the fact that a new reboot was coming into James Gordon Jr. as a thing is just a theory. And, I mean, none of us have Scott Snyder on speed dial. We seriously, not to be mean, but we seriously doubt that. I mean, unless Judge somehow has his phone number, I don't think any of us have him on speed dial, so we can't just ask him.
I do know that he is rather receptive on Twitter. He does respond to people's questions, but please do not take that as an invitation to go harass him in his DMs.
No. That isn't that. Yeah, this is a man. Yeah. I mean, I have a ridiculously small audience, so I'm not that worried, but just in case this somehow is the episode that blows up, please do not go after Scott Snyder. We're speculating on what happened with him, and in my personal opinion, finding out that, oh, he thought that his work didn't matter, that, like, puts him more in the ball court that I would agree with him. Like, I wouldn't exactly be happy if it turns out that my new character that was kind of an allegory for people who are mentally ill being abused, and then, you know, kind of, and wanted to turn him into, like, almost the vindicator for mentally ill people. Is that, like, the right way to go about my wording?
I'm not familiar with the reference at that point, but yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say is that, like, Scott Snyder was trying to use James Gordon Jr. as the way to, like, break the mentally ill stereotype that they're all evil and blah 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 blah, and Jim is basically coming to this realization in the story, and then all of a sudden, like, it just plummets. I'm on the side of this theory, not just because I made it, but also because it's the only one that makes any amount of sense. So
yeah, it's really the only one. It's such a heel turn with the character. It's such a twist that just does not fit the story that it was telling. The only excuse that you can make is editorial input and, like, some behind the scenes stuff that shifted things going on.
Yeah. That's why I'm on the side of Scott Snyder for this one if this turns out to be the case, because it's like, god damn it, dude. But once again, editorial fucks things up at DC. A page 7 story in the newspaper because who didn't see that coming? Anyways, was there anything
Yeah.
else that you wanted to bring up with Black Mirror? Any little bits of trivia or whatever?
No, I think I brought up everything so far. This was, like I said, this was the last storyline before the New 52. We went over all the little behind-the-scenes details going on with this comic just now, with all that type of stuff. I went over all the little other storylines, like the
Daughter of
auction
Tony
house
Zuko.
and the Tony Zuko's daughter and things like that. There was a storyline involving some guy having a pet killer whale at one point.
Having a what?
A pet killer whale.
Well, it's comic books. We have a woman who got turned into a humanoid orca that marries a crocodile man, so...
And now she's dating a clay woman.
Oh! Is that a thing they're doing with orca now?
I don't know the actual story, but I'm pretty sure there was a story for where they had the lady clayface woman end up dating the orca.
Huh. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Neat. I kind of dig that. It's nice to see when the bizarre concepts are actually given a little bit of respect. But tangent aside, if that is all for Black Mirror, then I think we're done here.
Yep.
Except I do have one last question. Will you be coming to the Halloween special recording thingy on the 30th?
What are we talking about?
Halloween stuff, just in general. No script or anything. It's mostly just favorite costumes and like Halloween stories. What you like to do for the holidays? Like, it's a very loose format, but it's a spooky Halloween special.
I would gladly be on that.
Splendid. Same time and all that. I know Mono's not going to be able to make it. I'm pretty sure Judge is going to be able to make it. And we have a new person in our sphere who they are interested in potentially joining in too. So I'm very excited for that. And I still have not decided on a topic for November, I don't think. So that'll be something I'll have to iron out in the meantime. But that, I believe, is going to do it.
All right.
Thanks everybody who decided to swing by and watch. Thanks again, Honey, for joining in and suggesting the topic, even if it's like, we spent half of it dunking on it, but I think that particular story warrants its dunking. But
yeah, there's nothing redeemable about the story. Like, if you want to read this, I would recommend just stopping as soon as the heel face turn happens. Just don't bother. Don't touch it after
is it one of those things where it's like the twist is like the last panel of the book, and then you can be like, well, I'm done now.
Exactly. Like the twist happens when it's revealed that he's torturing his childhood bully in the basement, and that happens like literally like the last few pages of one of the issues. So it's just like, if you really want to read this comic, just stop there. It's not worth continuing after that.
Say no more, fam. Say no more. Don't forget to be awesome, everybody who's watched, and we'll see you guys on the other side for the Halloween special.